Welcome to the Brand Scientist Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Bruss, and today on the show, I'm joined with my co-founder, Grant Tom, and we've got a special guest today, Amy Smith. G'day, Amy. How you doing?
Hi, guys. I'm great. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. How you doing today, Grant? You good, mate?
I'm very, very well. Good to see you again, Amy. Fantastic to connect with you. And Rob, good to see you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to do today's show. We're going to be talking about branding as it relates to LinkedIn. We've got the subject matter expert on the show with us here today. Amy has built a significant business around LinkedIn and building personal brands on LinkedIn.
I kind of landed into the world of branding by accident, really. I was working very much behind the scenes for a long time as an executive recruiter. So way back before I started my business, I was what I call myself a bit of a LinkedIn lurker. I was very much behind the scenes. Like I had a profile, but I didn't really do much with my own brand on my profile. My job at the time was really headhunting CEOs on the platform and, reaching out to them behind the scenes and sending messages and those sorts of things. And so, at that time, branding wasn't something that I'd really thought about because I was working for a company, and so they looked after the branding side of things and I was just sort of underneath that banner. But when it started for me to start my own thing and really stand on my own 2 feet and build up my coaching and consulting, that's when branding became really important because you no longer have those sort of legs to stand on, if you like, from the established credibility and trust that another brand has built up. So that's when I really had to start thinking and diving into, what was my brand? How did I want to represent myself? And how was I going to build trust and credibility in the market to people that kind of knew me, but maybe in a different context to what I was doing right now. And also for others that had no idea who I was. And so that's where it really started for me. And LinkedIn was a big tool for me to do that in the beginning.
Yeah,
and still is.
Very good. Grant, have you got a question there? You look like you're busting out of your skin to ask one.
Look, one of the things that I always find fascinating about LinkedIn is the fact that it's not always up to date. It's not always relevant. So I don't always know if I should be trusting the information that's on there. So, Amy, what is it that you think about people should be doing on LinkedIn? How best should they be utilizing that in just from a surface level? We'll get into it a little bit deeper down the show, but what is the fundamentals of what people should be thinking about when being on a LinkedIn platform?
Yeah, so I guess the first thing you're thinking about, like, what is your real objective to be on the platform? So it can be different for different people. If we're thinking about it from founder or business owner, or maybe even, a solo entrepreneur, coach or consultant, then you really want to look at using the platform to get clients or get new customers, and really look at a way that you can start to have people that are sold on you before you've even spoken to them. So using LinkedIn as a way to share your knowledge, share your expertise, and actually carve out a bit of a space of what you want to be known for. I think that's really important on LinkedIn because, as you said, there's so much noise out there on LinkedIn and also other platforms. So it's really about thinking around, like, what is your real purpose? What do you know? What do you know for sure? What do you want to share in terms of your knowledge and expertise? And what's really important for your future clients and maybe even your existing clients to know about you as well? And I think that's a really great place to start. It's not about trying to be everything to everyone. I think with branding, the more specific you can be, the easier it is for you. Because you're talking about things that you know really well, and the easier it is for you to attract the right kinds of clients towards you as well.
Yeah, well said. From the recruiter perspective, man, that's a hard job. That one, that's a really tough job there. So I've got a couple of questions about that. You kind of cut your teeth as a long time lurker on LinkedIn there, utilizing the platform to find CEOs and whatnot. But how did those CEOs represent themselves? How did you disseminate between a good one and a bad one? To your point, you're talking about how to represent yourself and what is it that you stand for, and I'm an expert here and here. But as you're looking at, if you can cast your mind back to when you were a recruiter and you're looking for those people, did certain things stand out to you, or was it just little nuanced things that are subliminal in your mind, or was it like big things that you saw?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So I remember this one CEO that I came across, and the biggest sort of lesson that I learned was sort of perception is reality on LinkedIn. And so the way that we put ourselves out there on the platform, the way our profile is designed and the way that the information that we have in our profile, we have one chance to make a first impression. Most people will spend around 6 seconds on your LinkedIn profile before they'll make a decision as to whether they're going to consume more.
Even a recruiter?
Someone else. Even a recruiter.
Even a recruiter is like, I'm not touching that one.
Totally. Too many people to get through. Like it's the reality. And so the top part of your profile is absolutely crucial to capture attention. So having a headline, having visual media on your profile as well, like a cover image, is so important. Like if you have visual media on your profile will naturally be viewed 21 times more than someone else that doesn't have visual media on their profile. And so it's interesting when you're talking about kind of like the subliminal messages it sends as well. There was one CEO that I was having a look at, and his LinkedIn profile. So I had his resume as well at the time, and I was also looking at his LinkedIn profile. And there was such a disconnect between his resume and all of the amazing things that he'd done. Like he's one of the leading CEOs in Australia for a big retail brand. And then on his LinkedIn profile, it was like skeleton of information. Like there was really bare bones of information. There was not a lot going on. There was no profile picture at all. And so, maybe this was a millennial thing because we're used to like having all of this information at our fingertips. But for me, if we think about the subliminal message in that, there was a couple of things around not spending enough time and effort and what that sort of reflects on that person in terms of not having that on their LinkedIn profile. But also, when we can't get access to the information that we intuitively want these days, it breaks trust.
Yeah.
So there was like this element of like, I didn't trust this guy, but I didn't know why. Right. And I think all of this happens kind of subconsciously. And so, he ended up, when he was working in that company, he was one of the best mentors, CEOs that we ever brought on. But his LinkedIn profile didn't reflect that. And so I think, the lesson here is that there's so many people out there that have amazing skills, amazing qualifications, experiences, and the people that are in their inner circle and in their world that they know personally, they know that. And they often, might rely on word of mouth and referrals for a lot of their work. But if you're looking to really expand and you're looking to really build that same level of trust with people that are brand new to you, then it has to be congruent. It has to be congruent from how you show up in the offline space to also how you're represented online. So that was sort of one of the biggest things that I think is that perception is reality these days. Unfortunately, that's kind of, fortunately or fortunately, I don't know, that's kind of the game that we play.
So Amy, when is it too long? Like when is they're just writing too much stuff? Because I find that if there's just too much, I'll read it later, I'll get back to it later, and I never do. Or when is it that there's just people have done so many things and they've done so many chops and changes that it also breaks a bit of distrust? How do you put the best foot forward?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to like, what's your objective for right now and where are you heading? And you want to make sure that that's sort of leading the way on your profile. So there's, we can all have, former lives and past lives with things that we've done, and we're allowed to chop and change and we're allowed to evolve. And that's part of life. And that's part of, growing your brand and your business, often the case as well. And so I think it's about leading the way with what is it that your future clients or current clients or customers need to see from you right now in order to know that you're the right fit to work with them. And so leading the way with that. And from an algorithm perspective with LinkedIn, it's actually really beneficial to have a fully built out profile. So to use all of the keywords that are available on LinkedIn is actually really beneficial because LinkedIn is so really well with that. And so the more that you can actually have in your profile, the more kind of LinkedIn real estate essentially you can use to help you to start to rank higher in the search results. And so it's a matter of balancing both. It's a matter of you want to make sure that your profile is working for LinkedIn, for the platform, so that you can start to, your profile can essentially do the heavy lifting for you with the algorithm. But then you also want to make sure that you're appealing to, the skim readers that come in and they're looking just for that little piece of information that they need to make a decision as well. And so it is a balancing act between the two for sure.
Interesting.
Yeah, nice. Well said. It is indeed a balancing act. I've revisited my LinkedIn recently and tidied it all up and whatnot. And one of the things that kind of I noticed on my own LinkedIn profile, one really easy thing for me in the heading, in the headline, it says brand scientist. It says what it is, says what the business is, and it's really clear. And it's kind of a little bit polarizing because those words in the English language don't go together. It's pretty rare, unless you've seen our business, that you've said brand and scientist next to each other in the same words, right? So you're like, what is that? It kind of makes you lean in. There's a bit of intrigue and a bit of an anticipation thing there. And it kind of, the idea is it hooks you in to make you want to read more, right? So that's why I put that right in the headline, and I use the word brand scientist and the branding throughout it. So Grant has been very clever in creating that brand, and it makes it easy, makes my job easy as well when I'm going out there representing it. But not everybody has that ability. So for you, for instance, you're running your business through your personal brand, through your name, amylsmith.com. So if somebody doesn't have a business called Brand Scientist or says exactly what their business does in the first couple of seconds, hold on, they're just fixing I'll just edit all this out. They're just fixing the smoke detector out the front of the thing. It's only 2 holes. This is like my 3rd podcast today, by the way. I think it might be finished. It might have only been 1 hole. So let me just back up. So for somebody who doesn't have a business that is called like Brand Scientist, and what it's called, your business, for example, is your personal brand, Amy L. Smith. How can somebody in that first 7 seconds that you alluded to understand what it is that you're about? I'm trying to use a hook with a business name, and the business name is really catchy, right? So that's very clever, and Grant's been very clever in constructing that brand. But if somebody doesn't have that, they're working for somebody else, they're trying to represent themselves, what would you suggest there?
Yeah, so if they're working for someone else, you can obviously leverage off that company brand. If you're running with your own personal brand, like a lot of people do as well, one thing that's really good is to have like what I call a doing statement in your headline, which really kind of just elaborates a little bit on what it is that you do better, like who you're there to help. So an example, for me might be, helping coaches and consultants, grow their brand and business using LinkedIn. Like that's a bit of a doing statement around, exactly what you're there to do. And so when people are reading that, they don't have necessarily an affiliation to my name yet. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, depending on how well they know me. But they would have a bit of a concept around what you do. So it's a really great place, like in that headline, to add some credibility points or to add a bit of a doing statement. And the big picture idea is that you want to expand on what just your job title would be. So if you've got a job title, you want to expand on what is it that you actually do, not just the title. Because often we know that a title can have different words and different nuances and different meanings. And so just expanding on that. And the same as a business owner. You might call yourself a coach or a consultant or a speaker, but what is it that you actually do and who do you actually help? And having that right up front. You could even have some text in your cover image as well. That helps to explain that, like a bit of a tagline or whatever that looks like. And that also supports what's in your profile.
Excellent. Well, there's gold coming left, right, and center on today's show, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you reach out to Amy at amylsmith.com and connect with her. If you're getting some value out of today's show, please consider subscribing and ringing that bell there as well, because that helps us a lot. I want to move on to the next part. You've got some really clever taglines and some words on your website, which I really like because I'm the quintessential copywriter, right? I always look at people's words and what they're saying, and I love what you had there. You had align, accelerate, and automate. And there's like a 1, 2, 3 thing that you're doing. You're taking people through a transition. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? That's obviously related to LinkedIn, your profile, and how you should actually be using LinkedIn to capture more business. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the way I kind of think about it is, with LinkedIn and when we're building our brand on LinkedIn, we kind of want to think about, we're building a house. We want to make sure that our cement foundation and our slab is really solid first before we start putting on the walls, before we start putting on the roof. So one of the biggest mistakes that I see a lot of people making is they think, okay, what's the most automated way to do this, or what's the quickest way to do this? But they actually haven't got their foundations set first. And so the whole house can just crumble. And so we kind of get the analogy there. But really around these 3 steps, when we think about align, it's what we were talking about a little bit earlier around making sure that your LinkedIn profile is really aligned to the LinkedIn platform and what that platform needs from your profile in order for your profile to be able to do a bit of the heavy lifting. So you want LinkedIn working with you to make sure that you're coming up higher in the search results. People can get the information that they need. They also know that next step to take with you as well. And so it's all well and good to have like this brand new, world-class profile sitting there. But we need to actually accelerate how many people can come across that profile. So when we talk about acceleration, what we're looking at is how do we really accelerate our network growth to make sure that we're getting in front of the right kinds of people, and we also have the right kinds of people reaching out to us. So often this is a case of really building out your content strategy with LinkedIn and finding your voice on the platform. So really looking at how you're going to represent yourself, what are some of the themes that you're going to talk about, what works and what doesn't on the LinkedIn platform as well, to make sure that you're actually getting in front of the right people and they have a way of reaching out. And then we can get to the more fun, leverage, sustainable, scalable things when we look at sort of automating, whether that be with people, AI, all the sorts of things that we can create leverage, in the system, so that in the beginning, always in business, right? It's always us in the beginning as the business leader. Like we're in the trenches, we're learning, we're strategizing, we're doing the thing, we're working it all out. But it doesn't have to be you forever. So once you've kind of set this up, this is something that becomes an ongoing, consistent system in your business, gets you in front of the right people, brings them into your world, builds trust, builds credibility, and essentially they're sold on you before you've even had a conversation about working together. So it really interesting. One of my clients sort of run through this system with him, and after his 6th ever post on LinkedIn, like he kind of describes himself as a pretty private guy. So he's, in his own words, pretty shy, pretty introverted, pretty private. And so he was quite hesitant about putting himself out there on LinkedIn and creating content. Rightly so, he'd never done it before. But once we worked out the right strategy that actually played to his strengths, he was able to start sharing his expertise. Long story short, he had a CEO that had reached out to him behind the scenes via a message based on what he'd seen him share. And that resulted in a $300,000 consulting project for him. And that all happened within 6 weeks. So that's kind of the power of when this system starts to work for you.
Yeah, fantastic. You've done a good job boiling down all of that into 3 words, right? And those 3 key words are summarizing exactly how you work and what that actually means. Is that the exception to the rule when you apply that system that you're talking about, or is that something that happens pretty frequently?
Yeah, so I always like to say, if you work the system works, right? There's no guarantees in life. Like if we all sit there and watch Netflix and do nothing and don't put any effort into things, then things aren't going to work, right?
A bag of money will fall from the sky imaginarily into my lap. What are you talking about?
Exactly, right? It's a shock. It's a shock.
But it doesn't, yeah.
That's it. But that story is not uncommon. So, varying scales of things as well. But we've had clients that have gone from, 6 figures a year to multiple 6 figures within the first quarter of working with us just from this. We've had people that have landed their first ever clients as well. So didn't have a website, didn't have anything in terms of all the necessary branding that we would know to have. But yet could still find clients and be known on LinkedIn and still land their first coaching client, without having all of that set up. It's kind of like starting before you're ready and being able to start sharing your expertise is definitely worthwhile doing.
I feel like I'm at Tony Robbins and unleash the power within. There it is. Grant, have you got some comments there?
So, Amy, when you're planning like an article or a feature, you want to align into your subject matter. Finding content is quite hard, and sometimes you also don't want to make it go too long, but you also got lots of diamonds that you want to unshare. So, if, for example, is it best if you've got, say, 12 examples, that you show all 12 examples at the same time, or that you break them up into small little bites so that you're posting on a regular basis, so therefore you're getting repetition and you're getting consistency, but once again the article is a little bit broken in the sense of the tips? What is the best method here?
Yeah, so there's many different ways that you can do content, and I guess what it comes down to is you want to create what I call SPC content. And so what that looks like is we want to be specific to our audience. We want to make sure it's for them. So the method in terms of what you do that, if you love, writing longer blogs and that's your thing, and your audience loves longer blogs, like maybe you're working, I don't know, with some engineers or accountants, or dare I say, more detail orientated inclined people, then if they love consuming long blogs, then that's great because it's specific for them. P is all about playing to your strengths. So if you love to write, that seems like a no-brainer. If it's easier for you to just jump on a quick video, like and share like 30 seconds worth of tips, then that's great too. So play to your strengths. And you also want it to convert. So you want to make sure that you've got that next step that people can take. So in your example, Grant, like I think it's a great example of what we call a domino piece of content, where you've got one sort of longer form piece of content like a blog, which then you can actually leverage to create mini pieces of content throughout that as well. So it's a really, really good strategy that works very well on the platform. Even though, like you said, it might feel a little bit disjointed with some of the tips, when you've got the right plan and the right strategy, it can flow really easily. And it can still, each piece of those content is kind of like, employees essentially working for you, bringing in the right kinds of people when they're working and doing their job. So I think that's a really good strategy, is having that domino piece of content, because it's very high leverage. So it means that you don't have to spend your whole entire life creating content, and you don't have to spend your whole entire life on the platform, because that's not the goal.
That's definitely
many of us as business owners, we want to have a life and a business as well.
Absolutely. So
the secret is to have consistency. I think it's when you're on and then you leave it for a long time, you come back. I think that breaks the rhythm. I think the secret is to have a plan, maybe a media plan or a schedule for a month, a year, whatever was suitable to you. But then at the same time, know that you're going to be posting regularly and you're committing to it. I think that I've noticed with a lot of clients that I try and get them to do is plan ahead rather than plan in arrears. So basically, the deadline's tomorrow. I haven't found an article yet. Let me quickly do something. But if you know that you've got 6 months of articles sort of planned and booked ahead, that you don't have to worry about it. You're actually looking for month 7 right now, but you know that the next 6 months is taken care of. So I think it's in the planning and the timing in order to build repetition.
Totally. Yeah. LinkedIn rewards consistency. You actually, if you're going from not being active at all on LinkedIn to then wanting to be active and sharing content, you actually have to teach LinkedIn that you're active now.
Yeah.
And so it does take that form of consistency over time. Like LinkedIn would rather see you post once a week consistently for 7 months than to post once every day for 7 days and then not post anything for a year. So consistency is what wins. And to your point, Grant, I think it's, you can batch content, you can do all sorts of things to like schedule it in your diary. You can schedule it directly onto the LinkedIn platform now as well. And so if you've got, you might be feeling really creative one day and you might have 4 different post ideas that pop up all at once. And so you can actually schedule those in advance at that time. So I think it's, just important to sort of carve out that planning time, like you said, and that strategy, just as you would, when you're bringing on a client and you're carving out how you're going to work with them. It's just as important for your business.
Very nicely said. And I was looking at ChatGPT and Canva integration the other day, which is really clever. And so I've got a graphic on the screen that says your thoughts on calls to action, CTAs, versus value. And you look out there, there's 1,000 people that say 1,000 different things, For every 10 pieces of value you give a call to action, or just give value. Don't worry about calls to action. If they like it, they'll connect with you, right? So there's different philosophies around that. But when I saw the ChatGPT and the Canva thing, the ChatGPT created it, you plug it into Canva and it created a carousel. And it created a nice carousel of content. And I thought, there's the balance right there, because you can give value in the carousel. And at the end of it, you're like, well, if you like what you see here, come and get some more over there. Do you agree that that's a good idea to do something like that? Or do you subscribe to value only? Or how do you think about that when you're posting?
Yeah, totally. So it is a mix, right? I think if you sit back and never offer a chance for people to take a next step with you or to work with you, that's going to be really tough in your business. You know, people often are craving what's next. You know, if you've given so much value, if you've given so much value, they're like kind of like, well, where do I go from here? Like, you have to be the one leading that conversation as the business owner. But there's a real mix and a balance, because if we did that all of the time, then people get sick of us. People go like, oh, why am I following this person? Like, it's all about them. It's not about me. And so you want to create a good balance. There's 3 types of content that I suggest works really well on LinkedIn. You want to create content that connects. So content that actually connects with your audience. This is the value-based content. This is the, you know, creating a human connection on the platform with others, getting the pulse of your network, what they're thinking, what they're feeling, what they're going through. Like, that really bonds you to your network and people, because LinkedIn ultimately really started as a recruitment platform, but it also started as a professional networking platform. So we can't lose sight of that element when we're on LinkedIn. The other form of content we want to start integrating as well is credibility content. So this is often where we start to really seed our expertise and seed what we're doing. And it can be in a way that's still providing value and is quite subtle. So it might even, like, you know, a good example, you know, might be if I'm taking a photo of me at a speaking event, and then I might, you know, post that on LinkedIn and say, hey, I was at this event today. You know, here's 3 things that we talked about, you know, in this talk or whatever it was. And so you're providing value, but having that photo, you know, as an example of me up on stage, people go, oh, okay, she's doing what she says she can do. So there's the credibility. And then you also want that content that converts. And so that's a little bit more purposeful of how people can take a next step with you. You know, if you've got something that you're promoting, you've got a new program or your new offer, you might be talking about that a little bit more specifically. So it's really a blend of those 3. I find are the things that work really well.
Yeah, nice. Well said. That's I feel like I'm getting a free LinkedIn consultation here. I've got a whole bunch of notes in front of me, and I'm like, oh my God, I've got it all wrong. I've got to go back and fix it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Amy, for being so gracious with your knowledge. We really appreciate that and sharing that with our audience. That's really cool. All right, let's move on to the I guess the nuts and bolts of this podcast. What are your 3 top branding tips? I mean, they might be really quick and rapid fire, or it might be something a little bit more detailed, but what do you see as the top things that people should be doing on LinkedIn to brand themselves properly?
Yeah, good one. Put me on the spot here. Let me have a think. I think the first one is really starting before you're ready. One of the things, just from, you know, personal experience with building the business, it's really easy to play the comparison game with other brands and other people, and, you know, looking at what other people have and thinking, oh, wow, they're so polished and they're so out there, and, you know, why can't my brand be like that? And the thing is that it can be, but it evolves over time, and it might be not an overnight thing in terms of how your brand develops. So there's an element of just starting before you're ready. And even if you feel like you're not as polished as what you'd like to be, it's getting out there and it's refining your message, because that's actually going to inform how you create your brand anyway. And you guys are the experts on this as well. And so, you know, it is an evolving thing. So starting before you're ready, I think is number 1. Number 2, I think, is just being really clear on what you want to be known for. Yeah. Because we don't have to be everything to everyone. And I think it's okay to be ourselves. Yeah. And in fact, when we are ourselves, that's our biggest point of difference. And so sometimes, particularly I find on platforms like LinkedIn, we can hold ourselves back because we feel like we need to have this level of professionalism, or we have to be showing up in a certain way. When in actual fact, I've found that when you showcase your personality a little bit more on LinkedIn, and you give people a little insight into the person behind the profile, that's actually when you start to get the real cut through when it comes to developing your brand. So they're the first 2 that I think are really important. And then number 3, I think, is getting a fresh perspective or getting some outsider help, because we can sit in our own little bubble about our brand and the look and feel and what we want it to be. But I think it's also just so important to have a fresh set of eyes of others that are working with many other people, maybe in our space or different as well, in terms of what they're seeing, in terms of where the world is heading. and where we actually need to be, because it's okay to create your brand for right now, but you also want to be thinking about, like, what does my brand need to look like in 5 years time, in 10 years time? And as it evolves, you want to be on the front foot to know what that's going to look like as well. And so I think it's, really starting with what you have and being unafraid to do that, but also just know that it is something that evolves over time, and that's a good thing.
So one of the things, Amy, that you've been referring to, in the sense we've been mentioning the word brand a hell of a lot in our conversation, but in this context, this is about giving your brand voice. It's about having that communication. It's about what you're about. But within that voice, you get copy, you get visuals, you get video. What do you think is the best recipe or formula to bring about that voice in the sense of copy, visual, and video?
Yeah, so I think it's great to think about, like, how other people learn and how other people consume information as well, and make sure that your brand can kind of fit in with that as well. And so, if you've got people that love reading and consuming, the written word, then making sure that you're representing your brand that way as well. But also video. And you might find that, when it comes to sort of playing to your strengths, you might find that your brand actually leans one way more than the others as well. So it doesn't have to be an even balance. In fact, the thing that you actually choose can be a part of your branding.
Yeah.
Like, that can be a part of how you represent yourself as well. For me, I don't do a lot of writing. It's easier just to jump on some video and talk through some things than it is for me to sit down with a blank page and go, oh my gosh, what am I going to write? And so I think, there's elements of that can actually be taken from video. So you can actually look at leveraging what your strength is and then repurposing it in other ways to consider how other people learn around you. But really, you don't have to try and cater to everyone. You just have to cater to your ideal clients and what they're really looking for from with you as well.
Yeah, nicely said. Amy, as we wrap up today's podcast, I just want to say a big thank you for sharing your knowledge and your information there. I've certainly learnt a lot here. I've got lots of points here on my little notepad here in front of me. If people want to connect with you, the best way, obviously, would be on LinkedIn, right?
Well, that's right. I have to say, we were talking about LinkedIn, so absolutely go and find me and connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, my website is amylsmith.com. And for anyone that's wanting to get started with LinkedIn as well, you're welcome to go and grab my LinkedIn blueprint. It's a downloadable. It's actually going to go through a few steps we've talked through today in a bit more detail. So you can grab that at amylsmith.com/blueprint.
Awesome. And I noticed when I look at your LinkedIn profile, there's 29,242 as it stands today. What is the max? It's 30,000, isn't it?
30,000 is the max. Yep. So race to connect with me, because you won't be able to for much longer.
Well, that's why I said it, right? Because the people that are watching it, you want to go and connect. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it. What happens when you reach 30,000? They can just follow you then. They can't connect with you?
Correct. Yeah.
What does your inbox look like at that?
Personally, Amy, do you know all 30,000 personally by name, birth dates, Christmas cards?
Yeah, I invite them over to my house for Christmas every year.
That's what the automation part's for, right? Is the software sends happy birthday messages to everybody all the time like that. What does your inbox look like with 30,000 people? I got 11,000 people on my LinkedIn, and it's like chockers continuously. Is yours like that as well?
Yeah, pretty chockers. Yeah, but that's what we want, right? We want people reaching out to us, and that's what happens.
Do you have some tools to disseminate it, or somebody to help you to do that, or how do you handle that?
Yeah, I have a team that supports me with my profile as well. So yeah, that's part of the automation side of things, is making sure you've got some team to support you, if you're dealing with a lot of numbers like that.
Yeah, you definitely need that. That's why I kind of raised it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, make sure you head on over to amylsmith.com/blueprint. Get on her email list, get that download there, and make sure you connect with her before she runs out of connection requests. And then you can follow along and see all of the content that she's putting out there. I always like to give the guest the final word, because I've been talking a lot here and I'm just kind of facilitating this whole thing. Have you got any final remarks or closing thoughts as we leave today's show?
Yeah, I just think that there's never a good time to start when it comes to LinkedIn. Throw out a nice little stat for you that, right now we've only got around 4% of people on the platform who are sharing content consistently. out of, over 930 million users out there. So there's a huge opportunity. You just have to step into the arena. So that's, starting before you're ready, I think is a big key lesson there as well. And I just wanted to reiterate, even though I have a team, I am very much involved in my inbox as well. And so if you do send me a message, it is me in there as well responding. So I look forward to hearing from you.
Well said. Well, Amy, thank you so much for joining us here on the Brand Scientist podcast today. As always, thank you, Grant, for joining in as well. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps it up for this one. We'll see you next one. It's bye for now.